So I did miss the first one. Sometimes I have trouble. I think I put that in a text. Sometimes I have trouble opening attachments in messages, and I couldn't get that one to open like immediately, and then I forgot about it, and so but then when I got your thing yesterday, I thought, okay, I got to try again, and maybe I can just forward this to my email. But somehow the second one opened, and because I was doing this on my computer, and somehow just like clicking on it, double clicking on it, hitting, right clicking, it's like nothing was making it do anything. And then it appeared in like I don't use Adobe Reader, I use a Preview for most of those types of things. But anyway, so it was the same thing I had on my sheet, so that was really good.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
parts of it, I was quite unsure about some of it.
There are a couple spots where it's really hard to hear, particularly the A minor and the F in a later spot, because I think two verses are different. I think in one verse they stayed on A minor, and in the second, or this is like the pre-chorus maybe, or the chorus, I forget which part.
Yeah.
But so anyway, that's like way close enough because that's how I would play it, and that's what I hear when I did it. So what was different in your first version?
On the first version, the chorus was the part that I had the hardest time with.
Yeah.
And because for whatever reason, I just couldn't get I couldn't get the rhythm, the sequence
Yeah.
down in my mind. I couldn't match things up together. And so, I mean, as of yesterday, when I did this again after listening through it and listening to the bass notes, which is the real key,
Yeah.
um, and then, I so this sounds like it, and literally going through and um, playing bass note and stopping it, and replicating those as
That,
I
yeah. Yeah.
literally, you know, half measure by half measure, uh,
Yeah.
which was really helpful and all. But when I finished it, I thought, yeah, that's it. And so I play it to myself and try to sing it and to myself, which is really hard in this key. But I guess anything that Timothy B. Schmidt writes is probably going to be hard to
Yeah,
sustain.
not going to be a good key for anybody else.
Yeah. But then I come up with when I'm writing out, I'm writing this out and I'm looking at it and it's in G, right? I mean, the thing's in G.
Well,
Is it? See, this is where now I started asking myself, no, maybe this is not in G, because the F isn't in the key.
right. And if we were in G, what would the three major chords be?
Well, the C3 major chords would be G, C, and D.
Right. Okay. We don't see a D chord in the whole thing.
There's no D in the whole deal.
And we see F as like a major element. So, and one of the things we talked about when we first talked about this was the beginning is just C and G back and forth, right? And so until we hear more, that's not enough for us to know which key that is, whether it's C or G. We have to hear either more chords, or we have to hear where does it come back to and feel like it's home and done.
And that was the other thing. Yeah.
Right, right. And I think one thing that might have been just different on your sheet is when the first chorus ends, there are not two measures of C there. The last measure is G. They have a turnaround. They go to G just to kick back to the C that is back at the beginning of the next verse.
Okay. Well, yeah. Okay.
But the second time they do it, they stay on C there because that's pretty much the end of the song.
Right.
So I think that was the only difference I had on my sheet is that which I left in the house right now. But I just had a first and second ending for the chorus because the first ending it was G to turn around and go back, and the second ending was C to to I forget how it ended. It might have just faded out, or they might have just ended on that C chord right there.
Yeah. And that, well, they see that was the other thing was that it didn't resolve to G at the end. And so,
Right.
well, maybe this isn't in G. So,
Yeah. And then one of the other things we talked about too is that when you have two chords like G and C that are a fourth apart if we count G as one, and a fifth apart if we count C as one,
yeah.
right? So G to C is a fourth. So C is four of G.
Right.
And any two chords that have that relationship are also one and five in the other key.
Right.
So if we just have C and G, it could be C where G is five, or it could be G where C is four.
Right.
So the determining factor is the third major chord. Do we get the one that makes, when we see our third major chord, it will probably pin it down because in G, the third chord, and now I'm saying third meaning just of the three, not chord number or anything, right?
Right.
The other major chord in G is D, and the other major chord in C is F. And we
Yeah.
see those Fs all over the place, right? But then we also see two minor chords
Right.
that happen to be in both keys too.
Right.
Both A minor and E minor are in C and G
Right.
because they have the same relationship in terms of the distance apart that they are. And so it's F that is really the determining factor here.
So it's in C.
So it's in C. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But that brings me to the point that you or I cannot sing this in C. So you're not going to have any fun playing it in C.
Right.
And so, and usually when a song, we have to kind of make a couple, well, so transposing is kind of the direction I'm going into now, is how to decide what key to think about transposing this to so that you could sing it.
Yeah.
And, for practical purposes, we have the five main keys that we play in on the guitar. And those are the keys that we have open major chords for. So what keys are those?
So that's open major chords. We would have A, C, D, um, E, and F.
Not quite.
Oh, and G.
G, not F, right?
Not F. Oh,
Yeah,
not F. Right, not F. Yeah,
yeah,
G.
yeah. And so those are what I call guitar-friendly keys. Those are keys that guitar players write songs in. Now, they also can get into any other key by using one of those and capoing it somewhere. So we have kind of equal access to all keys, especially with five starting points. And then just by capoing one or two frets, we've got, access to every key. If we need to be in B flat or E flat or whatever, there's an easy way to get there, but you're going to be thinking in one of those five keys. And you're going to let the capo put you in whatever key turns out to be best. So so now we determine that C is at least too high, so we want to consider going lower. So the first lower key of those that would make sense to try would be what?
A.
A. So you could look so let me think about this. Okay, so the first melody note that he sings is the root of our C chord. I've been thinking about da 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 da. And it gets up to an E like right there, but this song gets way higher than that, so keep on trying. I mean, it gets up to an A, that's not in it. That's male tenor voices can get that, but that's not you or me. And so that A, if even that's the highest note, I mean, I just took a little snippet of a couple of pieces there, to me that seems like one of the high spots in the song is that word when he gets to keep on trying. Try is a high note, right? And so we'd want to consider having that highest note be either at least in our comfort zone, but possibly at the top of our range. So, and that note is what number in the key? We're in the key of C and we're talking about a high A.
We're in the key of C. That's well, that would have to be 7.
Not quite.
6.
6. Right. Okay. So we'd want to, if we start thinking about bringing it down, if we now bring it down to A, well, kind of easy to think. You can almost, without doing the algebra in your head, you can sort of do the geometry on the guitar, which is if I'm thinking, okay, here's my C. If I go to A, I'm going 3 frets lower.
Right.
A step and a half lower. That means my high note here is going to be 3 frets lower. It'd be here.
Okay. Yeah.
Instead of going now, so that was the again. That's interesting. I don't think I've ever used these two terms in terms of what I just did, which is talking about the algebra approach or the geometry approach. So with the geometry approach, we didn't even worry about what note it was. We just saw it's 3 frets. Okay, I go 3 frets. The algebra approach would be, well, in the key of A, what's note 6? And you'd go through your A scale, and you'd have to make sure you remembered sharps or flats, or you'd just go through the scale, and you'd be, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp is 6. Um, so there's the F sharp, and I know for me that's still not in my comfort zone. That F sharp is too high. So so A is not going to do it. I'm going to have to go even lower. Now I'm going to think. So now we'd be thinking about maybe going down to G,
Yeah.
and that's going to make that note. Well, now we're talking about a whole step lower again,
Right.
or note 6 in G, which either way we get to E.
Right.
Now we're getting close. We're still not in my comfort zone. I'd prefer not to get many E's, but I might be able to if it's not very much. You know, um, and so G might be kind of borderline. But now if I need to think about getting lower, the next one down is another 3 frets down because now we're going down to E.
Right.
Anyway, and oh, by the way, I might get interrupted. There's some people, a guy showing up to fix a broken motor or replace a motor in my pond. We have a koi pond here, and there's a little motor that keeps water circulating through a fountain, and it finally broke. And I looked at it the other day, and it was 1995. So we've been in this house for 20 years, but that pump had a 1995 date on it. And a couple of years ago, we had some repaired other stuff being done on the pond, and I asked the guy, I said, "Hey, should I replace this pump? Because I don't have any idea how old it is." He says, "If it's still running, no, because any one you buy will only last you about 10 years at the best now. So run it till it dies." Well, a few days ago it died, and so I, got a replacement, and he's coming out today to replace it. But anyway. So it might get interrupted for a minute. But okay, so or he might be out there right now fixing it and not decided not to bother me. Okay, so now we think about taking it down to E, or even D. That it's like we can keep going lower, and each time we'll kind of get where it might work, and but then we could use the capo. Like if I decide G is just a little too high. Now I might think about going to E, but maybe capoing it to the 2nd fret. That would just get me a half step lower than G would have. See, so that would put me in F sharp.
Okay.
But I'm thinking now in E.
Thinking in E. Okay.
Right. So the next part of this assignment is to transpose this to some of those other keys and see where your voice fits that it could work. So for example, the key that sounds the closest to C in terms of what the chords and their relationships is probably G, just because of a G chord and a C chord are similar layouts on the guitar, whereas an E chord has a whole different personality almost.
Yeah.
And actually all 5 of those chords have what I would call different personalities. That's also a description I've never used before too. So man, this is a landmark day in my teaching. but sometimes I describe those as different colors, and so like when I'm trying to figure out a song by ear, many times I'll be able to hear exactly what shape they're in. Like, oh, that's a C shape somewhere, but I won't necessarily know where until I find the pitch. Or I could tell right away that, oh no, he's playing a D shape there, but it might be capoed, or something like that. So that's what I mean. Each of those has some very subtle, well, not even so subtle. Some of them are pretty obvious because D and G, or D and E, have really different characteristics. But okay. So now, but what I'm really going to suggest first is transpose it to G, and see if you can sing it in G. Now that would mean that the melody, and so there's a couple different ways. I'll get back to that in a second, because get my pick back here. One of the first things that is really important to do when is like to at least, sometimes you might even have a problem finding the starting pitch when you just play a G chord, especially because you've just been hearing this song with C's and G's, and you've been starting on the right note for a C chord, right?
Right.
So on that C chord, go back to C for a second. So the note I hear him singing, I just mentioned this a little while ago, is that it seems like it starts on C. That C right there on the 2nd string, right? So that would mean that if we're going to do this in the key of G and start on a G chord, what's the melody note going to be?
If we're going to start on G, then we are three back from D.
Hang on.
No?
No, but um, a better way to approach this, and this is similar to what I was just talking about. There, a lot of times there are different paths you can take to solve this problem, and more important than knowing what note it started on is what part of the chord did it start on.
Oh, okay.
So in the case of our original key,
D
right? So the note we're singing is the root of the chord.
is the one. Yeah.
Got it? So when we go to a G chord, we're still going to sing the root.
Right.
Right. Now it's going to be that higher one. It's going to be the open G, and see that, and so now I've been thinking about. Okay, that's starting to seem reasonable to me, but also now, what are the two chords in the beginning going to be? Oh, so we have a similar thing like when you're transposing. There are a couple of paths to get from key X to key Y or Z or M. And that one is if it's very close, like if you're just going from C to D,
Yeah.
you could just look at every chord and play a chord one step higher, right? But if you're going further, it's really easy to mess up that math when you're going from C to G. Okay? And so the trick is, or a better approach now that would have worked for my C to D situation too, is know what numbers of the chords you're playing. So this would mean like even with numbers of 1 through 7 of what step of the scale are you playing? Right? So when we're playing the first two chords in C is chord number 1, and our second chord in the introduction is G, which is chord number what?
Chord number 4.
No.
In,
We're
in,
in, we're in C.
we're in C?
So
Oh,
G is
it's 5.
5. Right, okay. So whatever key I go to, those first two chords are going to be 1 and 5.
Right.
Okay? And so a good approach to do this is almost what I would call the slide rule approach. That term I have used before. but it's like write out the 7 chords or the 6 chords. We don't care about chord 7. Write out the 6 chords in the key of C. C major, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor. And right underneath it, write out the same 6 numbers in the key of G. So now you're going to have G, A minor, B minor, C, D, E minor.
Right.
So now you've got the transposition right there for every chord.
Right.
Okay? And so now our introduction is going to be G and what?
G is going to be the well, no, G is the 5 though.
No. We're transposing to the key of G now.
Oh, to the key of G. Oh, and so yeah, okay. So G is the 1. So G.
Right. So back to the key of C for a second. Now, so what we hear on the record is this, right? And then we hear this melody. Do 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 do. Okay.
Right.
And now, if I just start playing a G chord and try to find that melody, having just sung it in C, it's going to be really hard for me to find that note just in my head. But if I know that, I need to sing the root of the chord, I need to start on G. So now I start strumming the chords like the intro. Now I'm going to be strumming G and D, but I'm da, that's the note I'm looking for. So I'm going to do now G and D. And I don't know if you can hear the similarity now. It's a little weird. But now, once I get that first note, do 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 you know. So there it was in G, and that's all feeling pretty comfortable. But now let's think about the chorus. Keep on trying. Okay, that's going to get us up to E, you know, and that might be okay. You might be able to hit that E and not have a problem, you know. But but if you still want to take it, so kind of my advice here first is just for practice, transpose it to all four other keys, and then practice strumming through it in each of those keys.
Okay.
Before you even make a decision on which one is the best, the one you have the best chance of being able to sing it in.
Right.
You know.
Okay.
Yeah. So, did you practice strumming through it anyway? You know, even though we can't sing it there.
Okay. So, yeah, I think I understand. Okay, I understand that.
Okay.
Overall, basically making grid of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That sounds like fun. All right.
Now, so this, just for the sake of opening a bigger door, one thing we have going for us in this song that makes it fairly straightforward as far as transposing goes. Well, two things. Actually, a whole bunch of things, but let me not go into all of them. One is, it's just a basic strumming song. It doesn't have any unique finger picking or hammer-ons or anything like that, which are sometimes some little embellishments you can do on certain chords that you can't do on other chords. You know, like it's very easy on a D chord to hammer on the first string, and you hear this cool sound of from E to F sharp in the midst of your D chord.
Right.
And if you're in a key where that's not a D but it's like a C, you cannot get the same hammer on a C chord that you can on a D chord.
Right.
Okay, so a lot of songs that have more intricate guitar playing in them, James Taylor songs, you know, they are generally not very transposable because what he does on each little chord in his things is very unique to that chord. And, you know, so when I call this a basic campfire or strumming song, we don't have that restriction necessarily of it's not going to work in any other key, you know. Now, luckily, James Taylor capos many of his songs, so people that can't hit his notes can play his songs in the right fingering but uncapoed, and that brings it down into a reasonable place. So, for example, if I were to play, he does this song at the 3rd fret. Just yesterday morning they let me know. Anyway, you know, so that doesn't probably get too high, but it's like I would back when I used to play that song, I would do it uncapoed just to be in a little bit more comfortable range. But it's like those chord shapes couldn't be messed with and have it still sound like Fire and Rain. But see, uncapoed will sound like this. So you immediately know it's Fire and Rain there, and it might not even dawn on you that it's a lower pitch than the original, you know.
Okay, so what key is the original in?
So I got to elaborate a little bit on the question first and then the answer, because okay, so I just played it in A. Okay. Using an A, well, anyway, it revolves around A, and it uses quite a few chords not in the key of A, so it's a little bit more elaborate, harmony progression than this. So it does use a lot of, like, for example, it uses not only an E chord at one spot, which would be chord 5 in A, but it also uses E minors in other spots of the song. So, for example, if you were going to transpose that, sometimes you'd have to say, oh, well, E is chord 5 in here, but sometimes he goes to 5 as a major chord, and sometimes he goes to 5 as a minor chord. So you got to make sure that when you transpose something, the quality of the chord or the type of chord cannot change. Only the letter changes. So when he goes to E minor, if I'm transposing this thing, I'm going to a minor chord, and if he goes to E major, I'm going to a major chord at that spot, and it might, you know, so I might get into that a little bit, but we may save that for another day. But to get back to your question, As soon as if I'm thinking in the key of A, and now I put a capo on somewhere, I'm certainly not in A anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to be someplace higher, and it's going to be higher by whatever fret I capo to.
Right. So on that and that one, you capoed to the third fret
Right?
on the A string there.
Okay.
That would be a C.
Right. Okay. So now if I've got a piano player playing this with me, I've got to relay the fact to him I'm thinking in A, and if I tell him this song's in A and he starts playing in A and I'm capo to the third fret, it's not going to work because I'm actually playing in C. So either that's what I have to tell him, and if I don't know that as a guitar player, I can at least tell him, well, I'm playing an A chord at the third fret, and the piano player who might have more theory than me will be able to solve that puzzle and say, oh, that means I have to play it in C. Okay, so the terms we use for this when we start capoing the guitar is a relative key or an absolute key. So the absolute key is what you tell the piano player you're in. The relative key is what I'm thinking in. I'm thinking chord shapes. So I'm thinking Fire and Rain in my head as a guitar player is in A. And if I capo to the second fret, I'm still thinking in A. And if I capo to the fifth fret, I'm still thinking in A. Right? So those are all the relative keys because I'm not really in any of those keys. It's just what key my brain is in.
But if the piano player looked at the music that you're playing, he would see that as C.
Yes, as a matter of fact, let me see if this is right here. It's buried in there somewhere. One of the first songbooks that came out that actually had guitar tablature in it, which was not common in the early days. There was a Paul Simon songbook that came out in like 1970 or 71, and it was piano arrangements of all of his songs, most of which he played capoed on the guitar. So this piano arrangement did me no good as a guitar player unless I really knew my theory, because they've got it in the key of E flat. And I'm thinking, what the heck? How do you play an E flat? Well, in those days, it wasn't common for a book to tell the guitar player that the capo's at the third fret and he's playing in C. And that's E flat. It's 3/2 steps higher than C. And that's how he plays, let us be lovers, we'll marry our fortunes together. So here's this great book. Oh man, I got my Paul Simon songs. America's in E flat? What the hell? I can't play that. Now, this James Taylor book came out in 1970 as well and had piano music to all of his songs. Actually, it was mostly songs off his first album. Well, Sweet Baby James. So this is before You've Got a Friend and Mudslide Slim. So none of those were on this. So this book, and it had a picture of him and there was a lot of info in there about the movie he did, Two-Lane Blacktop. Did you ever hear or see of that? Hear that movie?
Yeah.
So he had a part in this kind of underground movie called Two-Lane Blacktop. It was him and Peter Fonda, and they're drifters driving around the country. You might want to check it out, Two-Lane Blacktop. Anyway, yeah, you might have to write it down because it's a weird name. Two-Lane, TWO, right? Not like Tulane the city, right? Anyway, but at the back of the book, it had tablature to, like, sometimes just the introduction to his songs or something like that. And that was the first time I ever saw Fire and Rain written out in guitar tablature. But the piano version, the piano music was written in the key of C because that's what a piano player is going to play. The guitar tab page that only had like 6 measures or 8 measures in it did say capo 3 and here's the notes. I don't think it even had the names of the chords in there, but it just had, what you do with your fingers. So again, this was the early days of tablature.
So cable the third, with an absolute C for the piano player,
Right.
relative C
So the relative key is I'm thinking in.
A.
Right. Right. Yeah. And then, well, interestingly, the other song, the Paul Simon song I just brought up, America, is same case. He's at the third fret, and he's in C in his head. So the relative key now is C, but the absolute key would be 3 frets higher than C, which is E flat. A step and a half above C. Yeah.
Okay. I think I got it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're just in general terms, using the James Taylor as an example, chord shapes are driving the choice. Well, the way that the song is played, the chord shapes are effectively unique to that particular song.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, since I brought James Taylor up, a perfect example of something you hear him do all the time is on an A chord and opening up the second string and then hammering it on. That sound right there, I'm hitting it open and at the same time I'm playing an A. You hear James Taylor there? Yeah. And so that particular hammer on is from, well, what note is that you just hammered on?
Uh, that is C sharp.
Which is what part of the chord then? Of our A chord?
A chord, it's the three.
So we're hammering on from note 2 in the scale, from B to C sharp.
Right. Right.
So on a D chord, what is the third?
It's the F sharp down here.
Which is where?
Second.
Yeah. So you can do the exact same hammer on a D chord that you can on an A chord from note 2 to note 3.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go to C. Go to a C chord. Where is the high third now?
The high third on a C chord would be E. It's all the way down there.
Right. You cannot hammer on to the third from the second on a C chord.
Right.
Right? So that's kind of an example of what I was talking about a little while ago, is certain things you can, but if I need that, if I play my C chord in an A shape, I can certainly do it. So that's what's happening. The A shape allows you to do this particular hammer on, and a C shape doesn't. And so you hear he has very elaborate. He has 2 or 3 particularly elaborate ones using that note. Sometimes you hear this, where I played it open once and then later hammered it on. I could do that same thing on a D chord. Then he has variations, that also works on a D chord. But those don't work on any other chord shapes. Our other main 3 chords, C, G, or E, you cannot do that.
Okay.
So, yeah, so he plays in the key of A a lot because that's one of his go-to licks, or so. Yeah.
And that's driven by the song, or the hammer-ons, the melody in the song, and his vocal range both, or is he?
Yeah, like a lot of times, he doesn't capo every song that he plays in A. So, he capos almost everything, usually the second, third, or fourth fret. He rarely plays anything open. Oh, he does You've Got a Friend open, and that's in a completely different key. That's in the key of G. He might still capo that too. But my neighbors are getting a giant. They're moving. They sold the house a little while ago, and they're getting a giant garbage bin, which I look at and I say, I know they're going to have extra room in that. That's cool. Yeah, yeah. So, um, anyway, so um, yeah, so different people have different. Well, one last thing about that is, a piano now doesn't have these types of things that are only available in certain voicings, because anything you can do in one key on the piano, you can pretty much do in every other key. You know, but that's not the way the guitar works, because we've just got these convenient shapes that we use all the time.
Right.
Yeah. So you might want to take a look at my lesson on Fire and Rain and just mess around with the intro a little bit. It's a little tricky. It's a little beyond what we've done in our finger picking world so far, but it certainly would be a fun little thing, I think, for you to mess with. And even the Paul Simon song America, which is more of a strumming song, it's got a very interesting chord progression and uses a lot of chords, and it uses a whole bunch of chords not in the key, and features, it's a C chord with this descending bass. Ooh.
I'm sorry, Neil. All of a sudden, can you hang on just 30
Sure.
seconds? Okay. Hello? Yes. 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 Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Bye. Ah, okay. Sorry
Okay.
about
That's
that.
right.
How to get you back here.
Just got to get back to Zoom, I think.
I see a blank Zoom screen here.
Ah.
In a Zoom meeting. It says I'm in.
Oh, somehow, yeah, I might have to rejoin the meeting or something.
This is interesting. I've never had this. It just, sort of took over the.
Right. Where do you keep your icons for like your programs? At the bottom or somewhere else?
There we go. Okay. That was it.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So
Um,
we're to America.
yeah. So kind of the last little thought on that this is that it's it's a C chord with the bass walking down to B in the bass. Then as it continues down, it goes to A minor. Like the next bass note in the sequence would be A, and the chord would be A minor. Then we'd hear A minor with G in the bass. So you'd reach down for that. You've seen these happen in other songs. And that continues its way down to F, to a whole F chord. And so another song that you should look at, I think we've talked about this, but Mr. Bojangles does the same thing.
Yeah. I was just thinking that this.
Yeah. And what Bojangles does, so it walks its way down through those C things, and there's two measures of F and G, two Gs. Okay, America is almost the same progression. When it gets to F, it just stays there. Let us be lovers, we'll marry our fortunes together. I've got some real estate here in my bag. And that's the end of the similarity to Bojangles.
Okay.
Even the first thing, it only got to F and then it stayed there for 4 measures. The second line only gets to A minor and stays there for 4 measures, And now the progression gets a lot more elaborate. So we bought a pack of cigarettes and Mrs. Wagner's pies, walked off to look for America. And this got a whole different section. Laughing on the bus, playing games with the faces. She said the man in the gabardine suit was a spy. I said be careful, his bow tie's really a camera. And almost, but now. Toss me a cigarette. Anyway, it's a fascinating progression.
Okay. All right. Great.
Yeah, so take a look at both of those, Fire and Rain and America, and then transpose, keep on trying into a couple different keys. But I really think the key of G will fit your voice. It'll make the highest note E, which again I don't like to hit that E, but if it's only for a second, I can do it.
Okay.
So.
All right. That's fun. I got a lot to.
You got a lot to do. Yeah, sorry. I hope you didn't have something else you wanted to work on that I was, before I hijacked this,
No. It seems like in all these lessons we find our way to something.
Yeah.
And so that's great.
Okay, good.
That's what I'm all about. So I'm learning stuff here. This is great. So no, perfect. So I will see you next week.
Should be good. Yeah. There's a slight chance next Thursday. It's not really till Thursday afternoon I'm committed to anything. I'm actually going to be out of town till Wednesday afternoon. I'm going to Phoenix. But next Saturday my daughter's getting married, and the